At 54, I had finally stopped flinching every time my phone rang, and then my son walked into my mountain cabin with his new wife and said, "We're moving in for a while." Before I could even set down my mug, he added, "Vanessa likes a clean kitchen and quiet mornings. Coffee by 6, nothing crazy." I just nodded, said nothing, and went to bed that night with a plan already forming. By 6 the next morning, the cabin smelled like cinnamon rolls and fresh espresso. Everything exactly the way he'd asked for it, except for the manila envelope sitting beside his wife's plate. By the time she finished reading what was inside it, every plan they'd walked through my door with was already in pieces. And Marcus left 2 days later without even his guitar. Let me back up. My name is Renata Caldwell, and I did not get this cabin by being soft. I spent 19 years married to a man named Glenn who had a particular gift for making me feel grateful for things that should have just been mine. Gratitude for being allowed an opinion at the dinner table. Gratitude for being allowed a credit card with my own name on it. When I finally left him 8 years ago, I took the dog, half the furniture, and a clarity I hadn't had in 2 decades. The cabin came 4 years later, bought outright with money I earned running my own bookkeeping firm, out of a spare bedroom for 6 years before it grew into something that paid for itself and then some. I built that business with spreadsheets and stubbornness, and I built this cabin life the same way. Slow, deliberate, mine. It sits up in the hills outside Asheville, North Carolina. 2 acres of pine and quiet. A wraparound porch where I drink my coffee every morning and watch the fog burn off the ridge. I have a garden that mostly grows tomatoes and one stubborn rosemary bush that refuses to die. I have a reading chair by the window with 3 books going at once. I have silence whenever I want it, which, after 19 years of never getting a word in, is worth more to me than almost anything else I own. So when Marcus showed up on a Thursday afternoon in September, with 2 duffel bags, a guitar case, and a woman I'd met exactly once at their courthouse wedding 4 months earlier, my first feeling wasn't irritation. It was dread, the kind that settles low in your stomach before your brain even catches up to why. "Mom," he said. Like this was a surprise visit and not an ambush. We were in the area, and Vanessa's never really seen the place properly, so we figured we'd stay a few days. The woman behind him stepped forward with a smile that had clearly been practiced in a mirror. She was younger than Marcus by a good 10 years, dressed like she'd come from a yoga studio that charged $90 a class. "Renata, it's so good to finally really meet you. Marcus talks about this cabin constantly." "Does he?" I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was soft, her nails were perfect, and her eyes were already moving past me into the house. The way some people look at a room, when they're not admiring it so much as measuring it. "Sorry to just spring this on you," Marcus said, which is a sentence that only makes sense if you actually feel sorry, and he very clearly did not. "It was kind of last minute," Vanessa added, drifting toward my kitchen like she already knew where the good mugs were kept. "Hotels feel so impersonal. And you always have room here. You're the one who taught Marcus that family doesn't need an invitation." I had said that to him when he was 19 and broke, and needed a place to crash after a bad breakup. I had not said it about a woman I'd known for 4 months treating my home like a bed and breakfast. "How long are you thinking?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Just a few days," Marcus said. "Maybe a week or 2, Vanessa said, at the exact same time. They glanced at each other. Neither corrected the other. "We haven't really nailed it down," Vanessa said, with the easy confidence of someone who has never once had to plan around another person's life. "We're kind of between things right now." "Of course," I said. "Let me make up the guest room." As I led them down the hall, I watched Vanessa's eyes catalog everything. The hand-built bookshelves, the stone fireplace, the kitchen I had renovated myself 2 summers ago with cabinets I'd refinished by hand. "This is gorgeous," she said, and she meant it, but not the way a guest means it. She meant it the way someone means it when they're already picturing where their own furniture would go. I noticed. I didn't say anything yet. That evening, while Marcus and Vanessa took a walk down toward the creek, I sat on the porch and tried to name the feeling, sitting in my chest like a stone left out in the cold. It wasn't just that they'd shown up unannounced. Marcus had always done things this way, arriving like a sudden change in weather, and expecting you to just deal with it. It was something underneath that. The way Vanessa's eyes had moved through my house like she was already taking inventory. By dinner, I had my first real piece of evidence. Marcus stepped outside to take a call, and Vanessa poured herself a glass of my good bourbon without asking. Then settled into my reading chair like it had always been hers. "Renata," she said, "I want to talk to you about something." To mother. Well, almost. She laughed at her own joke. I didn't. "Go ahead," I said. "We care about you so much." She swirled the bourbon she hadn't asked for. "And we've been talking, and you're out here alone, in the mountains, no neighbors for half a mile. What if something happened? What if you fell on that porch and nobody found you for 2 days?" I set my fork down very carefully. "And what's the alternative?" "Well." She chose her words like she was laying out a presentation. "Marcus has been looking into some property management options. There's actually a real opportunity here. A place like this, in this market, could be turned into a short-term rental that generates serious income. You could downsize somewhere closer to town, somewhere manageable, and let the cabin work for you instead of the other way around." The stone in my chest turned to ice. Work for me. Managed by them. Marcus came back in right on cue, his face arranged into careful concern. "Mom, I hope," Vanessa explained. "We just want what's best for you. You've worked so hard. You deserve to actually relax instead of mowing 2 acres by yourself." "She explained," I said. "The mountain rental market is exploding right now," he said. "We could set up the whole transition so it's completely painless for you. You wouldn't have to handle a single detail." "The details." "Right. The details, like who actually held the deed, once the management started. Like what percentage of the income I'd actually see. Like how slowly those payments would arrive once the paperwork was signed." "That's very thoughtful of you both," I said, in a tone that sounded like gratitude and meant absolutely nothing of the kind. "Let me think about it." Marcus relaxed. Vanessa smiled into her bourbon. Neither of them noticed I hadn't agreed to a single thing. The next morning was when I understood exactly what I was dealing with. I was at the stove scrambling eggs for 3. When Vanessa delivered the line that would set the next 48 hours in motion. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Renata, I think we should talk about expectations while we're here." Marcus was at my kitchen table, scrolling something on his laptop he'd been glued to since the day before. My kitchen had quietly become his office, my table, his desk. "What kind of expectations?" I asked. "Marcus has a really intense morning routine. He's doing some consulting calls with the West Coast, so he needs total quiet starting at 6, and honestly, real food, not cereal. Since you're up early anyway, and you're so good at this kind of thing, I cook for myself," I said pleasantly. "Of course, but it's not really extra work, is it? Just something ready by 6, nothing fancy, cinnamon rolls maybe, or a good frittata." I kept my face neutral. 6 a.m. That meant up by 4:30, in my own kitchen, performing breakfast for a woman I'd known for 36 hours, in a house she was already mentally renovating. Marcus glanced up from his laptop with that same rehearsed sincerity his father used to wear. "We'd really appreciate it, Mom. You're seriously the best at this stuff." The best at this stuff. As if running a household for 2 decades was a party trick I should be flattered to perform on command. I turned back to the eggs. 6 a.m., I said. "I'll have it ready." Marcus smiled like he'd won something. He had no idea what he'd actually just signed up for. They drove into town that afternoon, and I later learned they'd stopped by a local real estate office to ask about comparable mountain properties. I stayed home and did what any woman who has spent 54 years learning to notice what people don't say out loud would do. I opened my laptop. Marcus's wife's full name was Vanessa Reyes Pruitt before the marriage. The first thing I found was 2 LLCs registered in her name in the past 3 years, both based out of Knoxville, both dissolved within 14 months of formation. The kind of pattern that doesn't mean failure, it means a method. A third LLC, Pruitt Property Partners, was still active, registered just 6 weeks before her wedding to my son. The second thing I found was a half-built condo conversion project outside Knoxville currently tangled in a mechanics lien dispute. Contractors unpaid. The whole thing stalled. The third thing I found made my hands go very still on the keyboard. A civil suit filed by 3 elderly homeowners in East Tennessee. Their claim: they'd each been persuaded to sign over management rights to their properties in exchange for promised monthly rental income that, after the first payment or 2, simply stopped arriving. The company named in the suit: Pruitt Property Partners. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I kept looking. Vanessa had been married once before, briefly, to a man named Curtis Boyle, who'd owned a small landscaping company in Knoxville with a strong local reputation. That company had sold abruptly about a year ago, right around the time their divorce was finalized. I found him through an old business listing and sent a short, careful message. Then I called Doris Whitfield. She was named as the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit, 73 years old, a widow who'd owned her family's farmhouse outside Sevierville for 41 years before nearly losing it. She answered on the third ring. We talked for almost an hour. By the time Marcus and Vanessa got home that evening, cheerfully reporting that a similar cabin 2 ridges over had just sold for well above asking. I knew exactly who I had let into my house, and I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. That night I served dinner on the good plates, poured wine I'd been saving for an occasion that actually deserved it, and listened to them talk about my cabin. Like it was already a line item on a spreadsheet. Marcus talked about knocking out the wall between the kitchen and the living room, about listing it on 3 different vacation platforms, about projected occupancy rates. He used the word we. For decisions that were never going to be his to make. Vanessa nodded along to all of it, the way she'd probably nodded along to everything Curtis Boyle said, right up until his landscaping company quietly disappeared from under him. She had no idea she was the key Marcus thought would unlock this door. Or maybe, and this thought sat heavier with me than I expected, maybe she wasn't the key. Maybe she was the one holding it. After they went up to bed, I cleared the table, then went back to my laptop. Curtis had written back 3 paragraphs, careful and a little bitter, ending with, "If you need a sworn statement, I'll give you one. Just tell me what's going on out there." By 11 that night, I had everything I needed. Curtis's statement, Doris's documentation, and a detailed complaint I filed online with the Tennessee Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. Then I went to bed. At 4:30 the next morning, my alarm went off, and I got up without a second thought. The kitchen was dark and cold, and I moved through it the way I always do before sunrise. Slow by memory, every motion already worn smooth from repetition. I ground the coffee fresh and strong, the way Marcus liked it. I made the cinnamon rolls from scratch, the dough proofed overnight, the icing drizzled warm. I scrambled the eggs soft, the way Vanessa had specified, with a little too much pepper, exactly as requested. It was good. Genuinely good. I've always been good at this. But the real work had happened the night before. I'd printed everything. The LLC filings, the lien dispute, the lawsuit with Pruitt Property Partners highlighted in yellow, Curtis's statement, Doris's documentation, and the confirmation number from the Attorney General's office. And slid it all into a plain manila envelope. On the front, in handwriting I'd practiced keeping steady, I wrote, "Before you ask me about this cabin again, read this." I set it beside Vanessa's plate. At 5:50 I heard movement upstairs. Vanessa came down first, wrapped in one of my good throw blankets, looking pleased that everything was exactly as ordered. "Renata, you actually did the whole spread." "You said 6, I said. I take people at their word." She sat. I poured her coffee into the mug she'd already claimed as hers. She took a sip, looked genuinely happy for one unguarded second. Then her eyes landed on the envelope. She picked it up. "Read the front." Set her mug down a little too carefully. "What is this?" "My contribution to the conversation," I said. She opened it. I watched her face the way you watch a storm cross open water. Slow, then all at once. The first page, the LC filings. Her jaw tightened. The second, the lien dispute. The third, the lawsuit, her own company's name highlighted in yellow. She got to Curtis's statement and went very still. I heard Marcus on the stairs, taking his time, expecting to find breakfast already handled and the morning already smoothed over for him. Vanessa looked up. Whatever had been on her face a moment ago was gone, replaced by something colder, faster. The look of someone doing very quick math. "Where did you get this?" she said. Not a question. An accusation dressed as one. "Public record," I said. "It's remarkable what's out there if you actually look." Marcus walked in, took one look at the air in the room and stopped in the doorway. "What's going on?" "Vanessa found the envelope I left with breakfast," I said. I looked at my son, 31 years of history between us. He wasn't a bad person. He was a person who had been quietly trained his whole life, by his father, if I'm honest with myself, to follow confidence wherever it pointed, without asking too many questions about where it was leading him. "Marcus," I said, "sit down." There are some things about your wife's business history you should probably know. Vanessa tried. I'll give her that. She called Doris's complaint complicated. She called Curtis's statement bitter and unreliable. She called the whole lawsuit a misunderstanding between investors who didn't fully understand the market. Every time she spoke, her voice climbed a half step tighter. Her explanations grew a little more elaborate, a little more rehearsed. Always the telltale sign of a story that wasn't built to survive being questioned closely. Marcus sat perfectly still through all of it, watching her the way I had watched her the day before, carefully, quietly, adding things up. The proposal, he said slowly, almost to himself. You wanted to get married fast. You said it was romantic that you didn't want to wait. But you knew about the cabin before you knew anything else about me. I told you about it on our second date and you said, Asheville Hills, that's serious land value. The kitchen went very quiet. Vanessa stood up. She wasn't calculating anymore. She'd moved into damage control. This is a serious miscommunication, and I think we should all just take a breath. I filed a complaint with the Attorney General's office last night, I said. That stopped her cold. It includes Doris Whitfield's documentation, Curtis Boyle's sworn statement, and a detailed account of a pattern targeting elderly property owners across East Tennessee. Investigators were already aware of Pruitt Property Partners before I ever called. My filing just added detail to a case that already existed. Vanessa's face moved through several things in a very short span of time. Then she turned and went upstairs. We could hear her up there. Drawers opening, the zip of a suitcase, the particular violence of someone packing in anger. She was gone within the hour. Took her suitcase, left her phone charger plugged into the wall outlet by the guest bed, and didn't say a single word to either of us on her way out the door, which was probably the most honest thing she'd done since she'd arrived. Marcus left 2 days later, not in anger, in something closer to grief, the kind that needs space to sit in quietly. He left his guitar leaning against the wall in the guest room, said he'd come back for it once things settled, and I understood that wasn't really about the guitar at all. He called me a week after that. His voice sounded smaller than I'd heard it in years. She knew about the cabin before she knew me, he said. Didn't she? I think so, I said. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm filing for an annulment, he said. The marriage is barely 4 months old. My lawyer says it's straightforward. That's the right call, I said. There was a long pause on the line. Did you know, when we first showed up, did you already suspect something? I felt something was off, the second you walked in with 2 duffel bags and a woman I'd met once, I said. I needed a day to figure out exactly what it was. And then you just made breakfast. I made exactly what was asked for, I said. I always do. It's what happens with the breakfast that varies. He laughed just barely, the first real sound he'd made in the whole conversation. The Attorney General's office called me 4 days after that breakfast. Pruitt Property Partners was now the subject of a formal consumer fraud investigation. My complaint had connected Vanessa's most recent activity to a pattern investigators had already been quietly building a case around for almost 2 years. Doris Whitfield's case was reopened with new urgency. Curtis Boyle's statement became part of the official record, and the real estate attorney I consulted afterward confirmed something that still makes my stomach turn a little when I think about it. Had I agreed to even a preliminary management agreement, I would have signed over effective control of my cabin to a company I'd have had almost no legal recourse against. I would have been the next Doris Whitfield. Except I wasn't, because nobody who has spent 4 years building her own flats alone, on purpose, is foolish enough to hand it over to a stranger with perfect nails just because someone tells her she's getting older and shouldn't be out here by herself. Marcus came up to the cabin on his own. 3 weeks later, no Vanessa, no announcement. Just that. Can I come by Saturday? He sat on the porch with me and watched the fog roll off the ridge the way it does every morning, slow and silver and indifferent to whatever's happening in anyone's life. I'm going to take some time, he said, before I trust someone like that again. Good, I said. He looked at me sideways, the exact same look he used to give me as a teenager when he was working up to admitting he'd done something wrong. You really weren't going to just let it happen, were you? Even before you found anything? No, I said. But I needed proof, not just a feeling. A feeling doesn't hold up, proof does. And you just waited and made cinnamon rolls. I made exactly what she asked for, I said. I always do. He looked back out at the ridge. Mom, I'm sorry I brought that into your house. I know, I said. And I love you. Both things are true at the same time. That envelope, the one I left beside a stranger's coffee cup at 6 in the morning, cost me nothing but one focused evening and a few uncomfortable phone calls. What it protected was everything that actually mattered. Not just 2 acres of pine and a porch. I built my whole second life around. Though that cabin is mine and I intend to grow old right here. Watching that fog do exactly what it does every single morning whether anyone's watching or not. What it protected was something harder to put a price on. The plain fact that I have earned the right to know exactly who I am at 54. I am not fragile. I am not confused. I am not someone who needs to be managed, relocated, or gently herded into a smaller, more convenient version of her own life by anyone holding a clipboard and a kind voice. I live alone on purpose. I grow tomatoes badly and rosemary stubbornly. I drink my coffee on a porch I refinished with my own 2 hands, and that is a life I built, plank by plank, decision by decision, and no one, not a smooth-talking stranger with a business plan, not even my own son, however well-meaning, is going to take it from me without a fight. Doris Whitfield has a court date now. Curtis Boyle's statement is part of the official record. And I have my mornings back, my fog back, my porch back, exactly as quiet as I want them to be. Some people will tell you that once you hit a certain age, the world starts making decisions for you whether you ask it to or not. That people stop asking what you want and start informing you what you need. That anyone who sees a woman living alone reads it as an opening instead of a life. What I want to say to those people, and to every woman watching this who already knows exactly what I'm talking about, is this: let them come with their proposals and their concerns about your living situation dressed up as love. You can have a folder too. And yours will be better researched.